And welcome back to the Financially Simple Experience. I'm Justin. You know, for the last few weeks, we've been dealing specifically with the 8 key areas of business. And as you know, I often teach that we have planning and leadership, sales and marketing, people operations, finance and legal. There's 8 key areas of business that all of us as business owners have to deal with. And of late, we've been dealing with KPIs, key performance indicators, PIs, performance indicators, and KRIs are key results indicators. Yes, I know there's a lot of acronyms out there, but you as business owners, we've got this. In our last podcast, we had Mr. David Kent. Mr. David Kent was the director of business planning with Heritage Business Advisors, and he walked us through the 5 KPIs that his company tracks specifically to leadership. Right after that particular episode, I was speaking with a very well-known business leader in the United States. If I called his name, everybody on the show would recognize this individual. And for sake of anonymity, he said, Justin, don't use my name, but he made an important statement to me. He said, Justin, if there's one area that I could strongly urge business owners to strengthen, listen to this. He said, if there's one area I could strongly urge business owners to strengthen, he said it'd be the area of leadership. Now, you may think it's sales. Business owners often don't have a problem with sales. You may think it's management. Sometimes we have a problem there, but candidly, leadership is one of those things that many of us, myself included, are often lacking. Well, I got to tell you, I'm honored to have today's guest, Mr. Bob Burg. You may recognize that name. If you're a reader like myself, then you will recognize that name. Let me tell you a little bit about Bob. Bob is a sought-after speaker at company leadership and sales conferences. And he's worked with business leaders nationally. He's worked with broadcast personalities and even former US presidents. So Bob knows what he's doing here. He's written several books. And if you've never read these books, I'm going to challenge you to read all 4 of these books. They're really good in written format. In fact, today I'm holding one in my hand that I've got a reference. I've already got it dog-eared here for our conversation, but he has a book, is probably the most sold book at this point, is The Go-Giver. It's, I think, one of the original books he wrote, along with his co-author, Mr. John David Mann. And guys, it's almost sold 1 million copies, that one book, and it's been translated in over 29 languages. So I got to tell you, I'm a little envious here right now. I don't think I've gotten near 1 million copies sold of The Ultimate Sale or the new book, Your Baby's Ugly. But in their newest book, The Go-Giver Influencer, which I've read with my yellow highlighter. You know that about me. It deals specifically with leadership. So we're going to dive into these conversations today. But before I let him talk here, let me tell you something very unique about Bob. He is unapologetic, an animal fanatic. He loves animals. I got to tell you, Bob, we live on a farm, a little hobby farm. We have goats and chickens and dogs and deer and turkeys. Buddy, I love animals. So Bob, thank you so much for joining us on the Financially Simple Podcast.
Thank you, Justin. That's so awesome to know another a fellow animal lover and a fellow reader who reads the same way, with highlighting pen and regular pen and dog-earing pages and probably yellow sticky notes and everything else. So absolutely.
I've actually got a pink sticky note in this book here today that one of the questions.
Any color sticky note will do. Absolutely.
I wanted to reference this one question right off the bat. I mean, I just go right at you because I was reading this book, The Go-Giver, and I dog-eared this particular statement on page 29, which caught me for a loop. I got to tell you, as someone who's read, just about every book that's at the bookstore, I'm reading this story of Pindar, Ernesto, and Joe. Right. And they're in the coffee. I think it's a Italian cafe, maybe at this particular point. And a question is asked by Ernesto about what is perhaps one of the greatest laws. And he makes a statement that I highlighted in your book that I had to read like 5 or 6 times because I didn't understand it until I got later in the book. But I think it's a great principle for us to start our conversation off with. So let me read this. It's on page 29. I'm reading from The Go-Giver. Guys, check it out if you're on the video here. It says, quote, not at all. Ernesto wagging one finger. Does it make money is not a bad question. It's a great question. It's just a bad first question. Whenever I read that, I thought to myself, Bob, I said, as a business owner, one of the questions that I'm often guilty of is, does the business make money? Why is that a bad first question?
Yeah. Now, it's a great question. Again, just like Ernesto said, what happened was Joe, the protege in the story, was talking to Pindar and to Ernesto Iafrate. And he noticed that as he brought up about something making money or making a killing or whatever, Pindar and Mr. Iafrate would kind of change it around to people they could serve or bring value to others and so forth. And Joe kind of got a little confused. And he said, so are you saying asking if something will make money isn't important? And that's when it went to, no, asking if something will make money it's a great question. It's just a bad first question. First, ask it if it will serve. Then if the answer is yes, ask if it will make money. And here's why. Okay. And let's take this in the sales vernacular and then leadership. I often, when I speak at sales conferences, one of the first things I'll say, Justin, is nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. Right? They're not going to buy from you because you need the money. And they're not even going to buy from you because you're a really nice person. Right? They're going to buy from you only because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And in the basically free market economy in which we operate, and when I say free market, I simply mean no one is forced to do business with anyone else. So in that kind of economy, that's the only reason why anyone ever should buy from you or from me or from anyone else. We can also take that to leadership. With leadership, no one's going to follow you or buy into your mission or idea because you want them to or because you need it to happen for you. They're going to do so because they feel they will benefit by doing so. Now, that benefit could be a number of different things, including simply being congruent with their values and their desires and their pursuit of happiness and what they, but all of that's fine. But this is why Joe was told, first, ask if it will serve, because, ask if there's a marketplace for it.
Right.
Ask if people want it, or a marketplace that can be developed, what have you. Because if not, if you don't lead with that, then it could make money in terms of if you take the cost of goods sold plus what you want to ask for it and blah, 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 it will make money. But if it doesn't serve, if there's no market, nothing's going to happen. By the same token, it can be something that everyone wants, needs, and desires and will absolutely buy. But if it doesn't make money, that's also no good. You've got an expensive hobby, which is fine if you want a hobby. And I think hobbies are great,
Right.
but that's not what we're talking about. So no, both are important. It's not an either or, it's an and. Okay. But the focus must be, will it serve? Then if the answer is yes, ask, will it make money?
So, Bob, as I hear you talk, I can't help but imagine that there was some amazing journey that led you to those pearls of wisdom, maybe in your own life or working in business, et cetera. Talk to me a little bit about your journey, how that you've come to this point to where whenever you speak as you are, these pearls of wisdoms are just flowing. What was the journey like? Give me just a
Well,
short version of it, if you don't mind.
thank you. Well, yeah, I was very fortunate to have wonderful parents who instilled in me these values, and that's how they lived their lives, and so I got to see that modeled. As I grew up and got into the business world, I saw other ways of doing business that maybe weren't as good, and you start to think, well, is that the way it's supposed to be? And is right? But then eventually, you start really observing and you noticing, and you see that the people who are sustainably successful, who feel good about themselves, who are respected, and who these are people who their focus is on bringing value to the world around them, bringing value to others, value to the marketplace, looking for ways to serve and looking for ways. And again, it's not an either or. These are the people who also do very, very well financially, and their relationships are great, and they right. And so that was. But you know what I think really though got me started in kind of putting this into almost a systematic way of doing so. I had been in sales for a couple of years. I started out in broadcasting, first radio and then television, and I wasn't very good at it. And I eventually graduated into sales.
Okay.
I didn't have any sales experience, formal sales experience, and the company I was with didn't really provide any, significant training. And so I was kind of on my own, and I floundered for a few months until I was in a bookstore and saw a couple great books, or not great. They were great books, but I didn't know they were. I just saw a couple books on selling. One was by Zig Ziglar, one was by Tom Hopkins, two of the icons of the sales, profession, who I just came to admire, and just what wonderful human beings, both of them. And it really helped me. And in a matter of weeks, really, my sales began to really go well. And just because I had a methodology, right? I had a system. personally, I define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. The key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, then you know all you need to do is A and continue to do A and continue to do A, and eventually you'll get the desired results of B. And so that worked, and I was doing really well. But a couple years later, I took another job with a company, and I was selling a high-ticket item, and I went into a slump, okay? And I was really in a slump. And the more of a slump I was in, the more I was focused on myself and making the sale and getting out of this, which of course, that's the exact opposite of what I should be doing, right? And I remember one day I came back to the office, really disgusted at myself because a sale did not occur, which really should have. And there was an older gentleman there who I didn't know him very well, and he wasn't even in the sales department. I think he was an engineer, and again, he retired soon after. Never got to know him well, but he was one of these guys, didn't say a lot, but whenever he did say something, it tended to be kind of profound. You know how we've all known that kind of person. And I think he saw me as Joe in The Go-Giver, who I'd write about with John David Mann 25, 30 years later, or whatever. He saw me as that young, ambitious, up and coming, aggressive salesperson who worked really hard but was very frustrated and wasn't coming near reaching his potential because his focus was not in the right place. Yep. And so he said to me, Burg, he was a last name kind of guy. He said, Burg, can I give you some advice? And I said, absolutely, please do. I need it. And he said, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Now, when you hit the target, he said, you'll get a reward. And that reward will come in the form of money. And you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget, the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It ain't the target itself. Your target is serving others. And you know, Justin, that was my epiphany. That's when it hit me. That great salesmanship, just like great leadership, is never about the salesperson. It's never about the leader. Great salesmanship, great leadership is never about the product or service, as important as those are. Great leadership, great salesmanship is about the other person. It's about those whose lives you choose to touch. It's about other people's lives being better just because you are part of it. And I think when we begin from that premise, if you will, that's when we're really 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
So whenever we as business owners hear that, and which I agree with you wholeheartedly, in my 25, 30 years of business now, I personally have experienced that. When I read your book, say all your books with yours and John David's content here, I was like, my goodness, this is my life.
We found that with a lot of great leaders, by the way. In fact,
really,
and this I thought was so cool because I didn't think of it until we started getting the feedback. But in retrospect, it makes sense that the first adopters of this book were the great leaders and very successful business people like yourselves. And what they'd write to John and me is, yeah, this is how I did it. And I try to tell people that, and they don't believe me. Because, right, remember, who was, I'm probably dating myself here, but when I was a kid, J.R. Ewing was the guy who was the representative of free market capitalism, right? And what was he? He was an awful, horrible, terrible human being who took it, right? But that's what people hear and that's what people see. And so, so most people are like you. They find a way to bring immense value to others. They care about making other people better off, and they can't, right? And they make a fortune by doing so. And people don't believe, right? So the first adopters were the people like you, and they started giving the books and buying the books and promoting the books and so forth. So they were doing these things. You were doing these things long before the Go-Giver ever appeared. It's just that you recognized the congruency in it.
Absolutely. Whenever I wrote the newest book, Your Baby's Ugly, I actually quote several points in your Go-Giver influencer. Actually give you some credit there, because it
Oh,
was like,
thank you.
this is how my life developed. But I heard this statement as from someone early in my business career, Bob, that said, people often say that experience is the best teacher. And then this gentleman said, touche, no, 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 no. Someone else's experience is a
The
far better
best.
teacher, right? I talked to my children when they were little, don't touch the fireplace, it's going to burn you. Trust me, daddy's been there
Yeah.
before, right? So as business owners, oftentimes we're running crazy. We know this, we're living this school of hard knocks, but yet to actually morph, we can shorten this experience. We can shorten this training. We can shorten the tutelage down a little bit just by hiring coaches or mentors. In your particular life, have you found that utilization of coaches or mentors have helped you prevent major pitfalls?
Oh, absolutely. I think that when we can allow ourselves to listen from others and learn from others, we always hear about OPM, other people's money. How about OPE, other people's experience?
Absolutely.
And so sure. I remember once reading that Harvey McKay, I don't know if you recall Harvey, but he wrote a book back in the 90s called Swim with the Sharks Without Being
Yes.
Eaten Alive. And he's had since 5 or 6 or 7 New York Times mega bestsellers. He owns McKay, still owns McKay and Mitchell Envelope Company in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is a huge, just very successful. And I remember him saying once that he had at one time 35 coaches.
Wow.
He had, yeah, one for marketing, one for sales, one for tennis, one for golf, one for diet, one for right. And he listed all these different now we can't all do that, it's like we just, but yes, absolutely. In whatever area we need to improve, we can try to recreate the wheel or create the wheel. I personally am just not good at doing that, and I don't have the time, the energy, the whatever to do that. I want to find someone else who's been there, done that, and can also teach it, because as you know, sometimes the best natural athletes aren't necessarily the best coaches. It's natural to them. They don't have the empathy. They don't have the right.
Right.
Sometimes the best scholars are not the best teachers. So you also want to have someone who can teach and whose values are congruent with yours. And I think when we can find mentors and coaches like that, we're really, we're creating that context for success.
Well, how would you, with your business experience, not everybody's been in business like myself 25 years or like yourself for many years. How would you go about finding a good mentor or a coach? With what advice would you give there for business owners?
Well, in terms of a mentor, which again it can be so very valuable. I think you can reach out to anyone who you would like and ask for advice. I think where people sometimes maybe ask in a counterproductive way is they'll just ask a person who they admire and respect, but who they don't have a relationship with. Just they'll say something like, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" Which is kind of like saying to somebody, "Hey, will you share with me 30 years of your life, even though you don't know me from a hole in the wall?" Or like saying to someone, "Will you marry me?" instead of, "Can we go out on a date?" I mean, it's that same thing. So, and so I think when people just ask, "Will you be my mentor?" It kind of, first, it doesn't distinguish you in that person's mind as being any different from the 50 other people who probably that month asked them to be their
Right.
mentor, and comes across even maybe a bit entitled. But and it's not that it won't ever happen, but it probably won't. But you can but you can ask anyone, you can approach anyone and say something like, if this is something that you either don't have time to do, or just don't have any desire to, I'll absolutely understand. I'm wondering if I might ask you one or two very specific questions.
Mhm.
Now, when doing that, you've created a totally different frame. First, you've respected the process and you've let them know you respect their time. This is not something that you feel entitled to. This is
Right.
something that is something that they're very busy, and you also gave them an out or a back door, right? You said right away if this is not something that or even that and that's so important, because a back door is really an emotional escape route. It allows a person to have self agency and to be able to make a decision rather than feeling cornered in or backed into something. And what I call Berg's law of the out or back door is, the bigger the out or back door you give someone to take, the less they'll feel the need to take it. So you're not giving them that out or back door in order that they do take it, unless they really want to, which they will and they should. But usually what it is you're giving them the out or back door so that they'll feel comfortable enough with you and the situation to not have to take it, right? They
I
know
love
you're
it.
the type who respects their, and then what you did, the third part was you asked if you could ask one or two very specific questions. So rather than just, hey, can I waste your time and pick your brain for 2 hours, right? It's
Mhm.
what you've shown is you have an agenda. And when I say agenda in this context, I mean that in a good way, not you have an agenda,
Right,
you have
right. I
an
got you.
agenda, you know what you, so now this person feels very comfortable. Okay. You're not going to take up much of their time. You probably, you know what you want to ask. You're a person who they can feel good about and respect the, the whole. So now you're with this person, and of course you research this person thoroughly. So you don't ask anything that you could have found out by, right. But I think we all know that. And so you ask those questions. The conversation may go on a little bit more, but even if it's just those couple of questions, and then you make sure you don't over take their time. You thank them profusely at the conclusion of the call for their help. And I would write a handwritten, personalized, brief note, not an email, not a text, a handwritten, personalized note. Very simple, just says, "Dear Mr. Johnson," or "Dear Ms. Johnson," or "Dear Harry," or "Dear Joanne," however that's. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to counsel me. Your advice was just priceless. I look forward to applying it right away. And if it's okay, I'll circle back and let you know how things are progressing. Best regards. Put it in a regular, an envelope. Put a regular stamp, not a meter stamp, a hand stamp, or send it out that day. Another thing I would do, which is a nice touch, is to, and again, you can find this out through their website or through, an article written, or even from their admin. Find out what their favorite charitable cause is that they support. Let's say that they're on the board of directors of their local animal shelter. So you send a donation, and it doesn't have to be a big donation, just send a small donation
Right.
in their name, and it will get back to them. And you're not doing it to kiss up or anything. You're doing
Right.
it just to, again, show that you respect the process. They'll be notified, and and then, again, a couple weeks later, or through a few weeks, or whatever it happens to be, set up a time just to check back in. Maybe you have another question. Now, here's the thing. In time, if it's supposed to happen, a mentor protege relationship will take place. If not, it won't. It might be
Right.
one or two conversations you have with this person, and there'll be somebody else next month or whatever. Or it might be that this person gives you some time for a few months, and then or it might, who knows? You just don't know. So what I'd say is go through the process like this, but don't be attached to the outcome. This
Right.
one person does not have to be your mentor. You'll meet many people down the line, and so forth. So that's how I would approach it.
Well, friends, that's sage wisdom from our guest, Mr. Bob Burg. And as I mentioned earlier, Bob and his co-author, Mr. John David Mann, has written the book, The Go Giver. The Go Giver Sell More, which I love that book. The
Thank you.
Go Giver Leader, which every one of these books are powerful. And most recently, The Influencer. And Bob, as I've read all four of these, everything you just said is woven through the first chapter or so of all four of these books. So I love that not only are
Thank
you
you.
writing it, you're speaking it. Something you may not know about me, Bob, is I read a book a week, and I have since I was about 16 years of age.
That's awesome.
I love reading. I learned so much. I think, you get a book and you can read the various types of books and kind of know where, if they're mountaintop experiences, if training experiences, if you can, if you gain one piece of information out of any book you read, to me, it's well worth the price that we pay.
Exactly.
So as a lifelong learner, and I have to believe, based on what I see behind you, all the books behind you, I have to believe that you're a lifelong learner as well. What is something that you're attempting to learn right now?
So I have really been always, I think, or since I knew that I wanted to learn, which really for me was at about, I'd say 24 years old, which is when I got into 24, 25, when I got into sales. That's when my education really started, because I was a horrible student when it came to, the school. But my education, once I got into sales and started really realizing that a big part of success in life was personal development, and I happen to love all the personal development books I was reading. So that was a joy, right? And one of the great things about the most fun aspects of being in my business that I've been in for 30 years is reading is something that's part of my business. I just love that, right? And so I've always been fascinated in understanding human nature.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's, when you think about it, we're dealing with humans all the time. So when you think about human nature, right, the general psychological aspects, the behavioral traits, the feelings that are kind of inherent in all humans. Of course, we're all individuals and we all have our own, but there are certain inherent traits of humanity that if we don't understand them, okay, we're always going to be wondering why people didn't do things that we think they should do, or didn't act the way we think they should act. Or, you know what I'm saying? But if we understand human nature, we can really generally figure out exactly the whats and whys of decision making. Okay. And that's both our human nature and their human nature, how it affects everyone. So I'm constantly, so I've always been interested in that and learning about it. But it seems like lately, my interest in it, I'd say over the last couple of years now, has exploded even further. And, and it's like the more I understand about it, first, the more I understand that I don't understand near enough about it, right? And I think that's pretty obvious, obvious with all of us, right? But I've been really that I would say is really the big thing with me. So I think there are books like Daniel Kahneman's book Thinking Fast and Slow, which was an amazing book at understanding why we make the decisions we make. Kind of scary, but books like Annie Duke's Thinking in Bets, that was all about how to make. She was a world champion poker player, and I'm not a poker player, but fortunately, you don't need to be. It's what she's in. She's the basic premise is that in poker, there's never a sure bet. Okay. But the odds based on the cards that you have, others might have, and what the dealer might have, it increases or decreases the odds of the decision being the right decision. Now, whether the right decision ends up the result you want, we can't know that, but we can dramatically increase the odds of that happening when we understand all elements at play. So I thought her book was wonderful. In fact, I just bought her next book. Let me reach over. Sorry. Her next book is her latest book that came out a few months ago is How to Decide: Simple Tools for Making Better Decisions. And I've heard wonderful things about this. Another book I just got through reading by Adam Grant called Think Again: The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. And I think this is an absolutely brilliant book at understanding our thought processes, which again, our thought processes is simply a human nature, and it's how and why we think. So yes, that's really right now my fascination once again.
What's interesting, Bob, is that I have 5 books I read every year, and I have since I was about 16. One of those books is by Napoleon Hill and a classic, Think and Grow Rich.
Sure.
So even over time, just the very way we think and the way we proceed, it's amazing that here we are some 100 years later and still having conversations about it, because the more we learn, the less we know. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Here's my copy of Think and Grow Rich from when I was first in sales back in 1980.
I love it.
2 or 3 or whatever it was. I've since got a couple other editions that are in better shape, but I couldn't ever let this one totally go.
Bob, I got to tell you, that looks like so many of the books I have. That's amazing. So as we conclude our time together, again, thank you so much, Bob, for joining us. I always ask this question. We have a lot of business owners who listen to us, and business owners last year especially got kicked in the teeth. COVID harmed a lot of people, helped a lot of people. We had somebody had amazing success. But whenever we're talking to business owners, I recognize that business owners impact so much. They impact not only the people that they have the honor and privilege to serve as customers or clients, but they also have their team members, they have their vendors, they have their community, the charitable intents. Business owners impact so many people. And so I often ask this question to our guests, and that is this: if you could leave one nugget, one tip, one truth, one pearl of wisdom, whatever you want to call it, for business owners today, what would it be?
I think it still comes down to understanding that every person who you're there to serve, and as the owner, you are the chief server. Everyone who is in your employ, you work for. The customer, client, right, you work for. And it's simply understanding that people are going to make decisions about everything based on their values, on their desire to achieve or attain happiness, and based on what they feel is best for them. And I just think that's the biggest thing that we as business owners have to know, that's always how others are going to make their decisions. And that's just understanding human nature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Bob, thank you so much for being on the show today. Friends, we'll put a link to all the books that Bob and John David Mann have written together. 4 books right now, which are powerful. If you've never read them, they will be classics that you will dog ear like I did myself. You will highlight them. You will put sticky notes in these because they can change the way you think. And Bob will put a link to all of your content, your podcast, everything that you're doing to help business owners across the country, and not just business owners. I've seen churches that have implemented the type of teaching that you and John David have both preached and taught. So just, man, thank you so much for your work and the impact that you are leaving on the human race and society as a whole. Bob, I appreciate it, buddy.
Justin, thank you so much. I so greatly appreciate that.
Friends, look, I realize that life is hard. I get it. Life is hard, but we are such a blessed people. We are such a blessed people. I was talking to my dear wife this morning. One of our dear friends had some very sad news, very bad news. And we were talking about, but look how blessed they are amongst this bad news. Yeah, life is hard sometimes, but life is good. Life is good. We have an opportunity every day to impact somebody. We have the opportunity every day to speak truth and life into somebody. So my challenge to you is, even though life is hard and life is good, it can be frustrating, but it doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Y'all go out and make it a great day.